So today we're going to be starting a brand new series where civilization starts over. If you guys do enjoy the series and want to see more of it, make sure to show some support by leaving some support. That makes a lot of sense, but you can do that by liking this video, subscribing to the channel if you're new, commenting, all that good stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So civilization is wiped out. There's nothing here anymore. And well, there's nothing here except for a few people. And they are going to be over here in Mesopotamia / Arabia, whatever. I'm gonna be putting them over here in this part of Oman. It's a group of people, it's like a tribe, maybe like 50 people ish, and they set up their new civilization along the coast of Oman. Now it takes a long time for civilization to officially be established because you have to go through the process of hunting and gathering to having enough people to actually have a trading system within your village. Then you have to have a system where the rich can get rich so they can pay more people and those people can work, and then those people earn money, and with that money they have more people. So people is the answer, and right now they don't have a lot of that. So let's skip ahead a few decades maybe. All right, the population of this little dot is like maybe 10,000, and it is now a fully functioning society. So this is our civilization right here, and slowly but surely they start to spread out and explore around their areas. Now of course they have gone on trips outside of the red space. It's very not fun in this part, and they really want to get up here if they want to have a lot of success. But using the coast to their advantage, they are able to survive. And this is really sandy in here, so the living conditions within this area are not great. So what they're going to want to do is get over here where it's a little bit better. And like I said, the ultimate prize would be to get up here to Mesopotamia, where there is fertile farming area and they don't have to rely on the ocean. So fast forwarding once again, this civilization now reaches all the way up to the UAE and colonizes the area. Well, colonizes, there's really nothing here, so they take the area. And as we can see, the civilization itself is starting to become very large. They once started all the way down here, and well, they're now all the way over here. And they do know about the rest of the Arab coast down here in the Gulf of Aden, but they don't have any interest in really colonizing that, because I told them the land up here is farmable and they want to go there. That's totally what happened. Anyway, Qatar is now red, and the population of this place is now around 1 million. That's a lot of people, and it's getting pretty big. So now fast forwarding even more, there is a lot of stuff going on within this country now. There are full-on governments, there's local governments, there's one ruling government with a king, and this king is not in favor of reaching the Mesopotamia because they think they're good where they're at now. Now, the only issue with that is that they are having food issues. Of course, there's fishing, but it is much easier to just farm and to get your food. That way you have unlimited amount. Well, technically you have unlimited fish, but also farming it's just easier. Okay, let's just listen to me. It's easier. So that king does not want to go up there, but a majority of the population does want to go up there. And what happens when you have disagreement within a country? Well, a little something called a rebellion. So we have this entire upper part of the country rebelling against the southern part. We have the loyal part and the reformist part. They want an expansive policy where you go get that Mesopotamian land and explore the rest of the world, because they're in Arabia right now. There's not much to do here, and fighting ensues. The population of down here is roughly 800,000 compared to 200,000. So yeah. However, the support for the blue side is enormous. Like 90% of the population total is in support of the blue group and not in support of the king. So really what you have here is not an invasion, but like pockets of this country just kind of collapsing. And eventually the king agrees to let them go up there. But unfortunately for him, these people don't want just that. They want control of the country. So they fight off the king's forces and eventually overthrow said king and establish their own government, which is ruled by a group of people instead of just one person, and we basically have ourselves an aristocracy. All right, so the new government of this place is going to do exactly what they wanted to do, and they are going to go north, and that's exactly what they do. So the voyage continues, and eventually the people of the red country meet up and go into Mesopotamia, and instantly it's 10 times better than it is down here. Slowly but surely this area starts to get filled up, and it kind of just follows in between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. I mean, of course it goes beyond that just because they're exploring. There's words of a sea up north, so they're kind of going towards the Caspian. There's words of an ocean over here, so they're going towards the Mediterranean. So really what we're looking at is human curiosity. And eventually most of the population is living up here. Now this is of course taking place over a couple of decades. I'm gonna say 30 years since this place was discovered, and this is what we have now. The capital of this country, aka where the government functions, has been moved from down here all the way up to here, but this city is still like a major city, if not the biggest city, but the capital is here, so cry about it, Arabian Sea people. Yeah, there's really like a clash between the country now, between, you know, like the neo-modern kind of Mesopotamian group and the old Arabian coast group, you know, the two ideologies crashing between farming and fishing. So the ties between these two areas is starting to dwindle, but do know that the main government of this country is up here in Mesopotamia, and most of the population at this point is along this strip right here. So the Persian Gulf is pretty populated, and whereas this place used to be very populated, it no longer is, and then everyone is basically living up here, like I've said. Anyway, let's go ahead and start to fast forward once again. Over the next few years, the red blob country starts to expand even more, and they eventually meet up with the Caspian Sea. And just to bring you onto another slide, this is what the world looks like according to them. Now this might be confusing, and I'm going to explain it so it isn't confusing. So right here we have the Caspian Sea, right? So as far as they know, it goes up like that. They know there's a coastline right there, but they don't know what's beyond that, so we can color that blue. They know there's a coastline, but they don't know what else is beyond that coastline. They know there's land over here, but they don't know what Iran is. Basically, fog of war. They don't even know what the rest of the Arabian Peninsula looks like. So as far as they know, they could be on an island that looks something like this, if we fill that in. Of course, the red is the actual known country. The white is what they know of exists. And everything else around that, they don't know. So if we take a look here, if you can see the line, I don't know, it might be hard to see. This is what they know exists within that line. They don't know about any of this. Anyway, this country continues to do its expanding, now reaching over to the Mediterranean Sea. And they think they have finally found the biggest body of water they have found so far, other than the Arabian Sea, aka Indian Ocean. So now they really are believing that they're on an island, and with this belief in mind, they start to go down the coastal areas, going into Israel, and eventually meeting up over here in the Sinai Peninsula. Now at this point, well, I'm not really sure what they're thinking. I mean, if I was the head of this country and I wanted to explore more, I would probably just say stick to the coast. So that's what they do. They stick to the coast and eventually enter into what is now Egypt. They also go down from this area and meet the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula, and hence technically explore the entire thing. And at this point, they're kind of figuring out what's happening. They see this coast going down here. So it's probably theorized that this is either like a big lake right here, or it's just like the start of the ocean. But to firmly figure that out and not to second guess themselves, they start to go down the coast of Arabia as well. But unfortunately though, they do have to stop as something internal is happening, and that is the breaking away of the original country area. Essentially what it does is it declares its independence away from the red team on the behalf that, you know, this is like the old sacred part of the country. You are neglecting it. No one lives here. So the people who, or I guess the local rulers, kind of rose up against the central government and said, we're doing our own thing now. And the central government is going to let this slide. Now, the reason for that is that there's really no point in holding on to that area other than like fishing. But now that they've discovered the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, they don't really need this. And of course, that is where the country started, right down here. But they're not really worried about that. They're more worried about modernizing. So the blue team officially breaks away and it starts its own conquest, which is to also explore the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. At this point, scouts have figured out that they are in fact on a peninsula and that Africa as a continent is something that exists and needs to be explored. So the blue team officially explores the rest of the coastal area of Arabia and even manages to cross over this little canal right here and lands in Africa, or I guess Djibouti. From here, they set up a sort of colony, which for now has the purpose of supplying any expeditions into Africa. Now, while all of this exploring is happening, we have another internal thing happening. See, only internal things can happen because there's only two countries that exist at this point. A group of people from the red team decide they want to explore. Basically, the red government said that they are not going north for now because they're more focused on the southern area which they came from. They also have interest of going into Africa or northern Africa. But there is a large sector of the population which wishes to go north because they've noticed at this point that it's colder than it is down there. You know, this is the Arabian desert. It's very freaking hot here. Cold up here. They've noticed, you know, people have explored up to this point. The country hasn't claimed it, but they have explored up to here and they know that it gets colder, especially in the Caucasus Mountains. So what we have here is something that's pretty interesting. So an interesting thing we have happening here is that a portion of the population is going to move. Now, I'm not sure how many people. This could be like 1,000 people, 2,000 people. It's definitely a lot, but like not like a majority of the population, because at this point there's probably like 2 to 3 million people living in the red country and maybe around 700,000 in the blue. And I know what you might be saying, Adizz, why are they so sophisticated if there's millions of people living there? And I know what you might be thinking, Adizz, if there's millions of people within this country, why hasn't that country expanded ginormously? And that's because I said so. Haha, you thought I was going to give you a valid reason. Nope. In order for this to, well, see, it's kind of hard to simulate this because when humans first became a thing, it was just tribes, you know, and then those tribes spread across the world without ever establishing like an official civilization. Eventually, though, they did kind of sophisticate, and you had Mesopotamia. But, you know, doing that whole tribal thing is not really what I want to do. What I want to do for this series, I want to have everything kind of blow out from one spot and expand outwards. And to do that, I needed the original country, which at this point we have 2. So yes, there's a lot of people living here, but it's just not expanding, and that's just for the sake of the series. Anyway, those people I was talking about, they're going up north. They do go up north and they meet the Caucasus Mountains, and a lot of them die. So they decide to not go up there and instead go over towards Turkey in hopes of finding another way to get around those mountains. They stick to the Turkish coast, going all the way over here to Istanbul. They go past Istanbul and go up north into Bulgaria/Romania, and eventually they decide to settle down over here in Ukraine. They officially establish themselves a nation around the Black Sea, and over the years this nation starts to grow, spreading down into Crimea and taking over that entire peninsula. They go back and start to kind of colonize the areas they once explored, or I guess went through to get to where they are now. And we have ourselves a new nation over here around the Black Sea. It is colder, definitely is colder than down here, and the conditions are way different. You know, there's wood, there's a lot of wood. And now we have 2 different types of civilizations. One that is, you know, used to the desert and adapting to the desert conditions, and one that now has forest upon forest of logs. They also have less oil, but oil has not even been discovered yet. I don't even know why. Why did I say that? I was trying to think of a difference, but I couldn't think of any. So yeah, I'm gonna stop now. Anyway, the red team knows about this now, and they know that the yellow team kind of broke away from it, but they once again don't really care, as long as the majority is happy, right? Anyway, they kind of do care, and they're gonna go north and kind of follow the tracks of the yellow team, and they meet up with the Black Sea. Now at this point, naval technology is not too advanced, so going across the Black Sea is plausible, but it's not safe. Whereas, you know, local travel like between this and this, that's fine. But when you get to these open waters, that's where it kind of gets a little dicey. But the red team carries out a new policy of rapid expansion, and they start to rapidly expand up north into Turkey, while also finishing off the coastal area and meeting up with the blue team down here. Now these 2 are not hostile with each other, they're just kind of, they're like isolated from each other, they don't talk to each other. There's no such thing as a passport, so if you want to go from here to here, you can, but it's just like a different ruling government. Anyway, the red team will now focus on filling in some of these areas, getting more so within the Arabian desert, although not going too far because that thing is hot. Eventually, we have the red team looking something like this. They expand a little bit more south into Arabia, but other than that, they're good. So with this, we have ourselves our first kind of powerhouse country. I don't want to say it's well, it is a superpower in the sense that there's only 3 countries, so it is the only powerful country, and it's the only country with a military. Now I know earlier I was talking about the rebellion, you know, fighting against the government. When I said that, I was more so talking about fighting against those who are like protecting the king. I guess his like guardsmen. It wasn't really like a full-on, you know, sword and shield fight in the streets, because I don't even think they have that technology yet. Anyway, the people in the yellow country are doing things. They're now going around the Sea of Azov and are making themselves a nice Crimean republic, except it's not a republic, it's an aristocracy. Did I mention that all of these countries are ruled by aristocrats? If you don't know what an aristocracy is, then look it up. It's basically ruling by a group of elites. Anyway, new group just dropped. This group, which is going to be a purple dot, is an interesting group. Basically, it's a group of people from all 3 nations who want to explore the world. They don't want to settle a country in one spot. They're gonna have a functioning country that moves around. Basically, a giant group of people with houses on wheels. I mean, not literally, but figuratively. This country is firstly going to be formed down here in Turkey, on the Turkish peninsula. Yeah, in Turkey on the Turkish peninsula. That makes sense. This group is going to be formed down here in southern Turkey, and this is going to be their first spot, but they will be moving eventually. But for now, this is like their main bases. This is where they're at for now. The blue team has finally decided to do something. They're moving up the coast of Africa. They see value in taking over the Red Sea area, so the red team can't do that. And this is where we're kind of getting ourselves a rivalry. Now, these governments, once again, they don't really have they have contact with each other, but they just don't talk to each other. But you know, they're kind of getting the sense of one-upping each other. So the blue team starts to establish itself in Africa, whereas the red team is more focused on Turkey and the Caucasian region now. Who would have known that the yellow team, if they had just waited like 10 years, then they would have been able to go up here, but no, you had to rush everything and ruin it. Anyway, we now have ourselves 4 civilizations. In a few years, they now look something like this, with the red team kind of focusing in on Arabia, and the blue team doing the same. Like I said, they're kind of like rivaling with each other now, trying to one-up each other. The yellow team expanded a lot, and the purple team hasn't moved yet, but they're going to. Now, something to note about the red team is that they're not very organized. They have their priorities, which at this point is Arabia, but they're not really focusing in on their local governments, and that is going to lead to some things, like one of them breaking away. So the Iranian government over here, which is its own province / territory, breaks away from the red team, and really the red doesn't even know. And that's once again because they're very organized and they don't really keep in contact with their localities and stuff. So this green thing is able to break away, and it's able to expand before the red team even notices. And by the time the red team moves to take it back, they have already expanded into lands that the red team is unfamiliar with. And well, if you know anything about guerrilla warfare, that's not something that's particularly good. Now, why doesn't the red team just go through there? Well, I mean, they can, but they're not familiar with this land, and you know, maybe the green team is, so that could be a disadvantage for the military. And ultimately, the red team agrees to just give the green area its independence, and yet another country is formed, this time over here in Iran and around the Caspian Sea. And it doesn't take long for the green team to get to work in expanding. They realize and understand that in order to survive in this world, you have to be pretty large, just like the red team is. And if you're not very large, like the blue team, you are going to struggle. Geography is also very important. So they move down and connect up with the sea. And there is a race between the green and red team to take over the remaining areas that are over here in Iran. So now at this point, the world map is looking something like this. Over the next few years, we have the red team moving into the Turkish peninsula, and eventually meeting up with the purple team, which they really didn't know existed. They're kind of like the boomers of the world. They're not caught up with what's happening with the kids, which in this case, there's a lot of kids. Anyway, within that time, the green team did its job expanding, going all the way up north and eventually meeting up with the yellow team, who also expanded and went down south. And now looking at this, we can see that this area is completely filled in with countries. We have the yellow, the green, and the red. If you guys want to give names to these countries, you can. I'm not really sure how that would work, because eventually, you know, there's going to be a lot of countries on this world map, but I'm just not sure how that's going to work just yet. The yellow team expanded into Europe, green team went north, red team is doing its thing. And now for the splitting of Arabia, which this is now officially filled in. I just gotta draw it. The red team has all of that, and the rest of it goes over to the blue team. And now we see our current world map, Cyprus. No one knows that exists. So now taking a look at the known world, we can see that the areas that are known include the Arabian Peninsula, basically all of the Middle East. We can see that they know about Greece, they know about parts of Africa, and they know about a little bit of Central Asia. We have the red team being the first country to go on the move, and they move down the Red Sea and eventually meet up with the blue team's colony over here. Remember, the blue team used to be a part of the red team. They were once under the same kingdom. However, some differences made them split apart. And at this point, the red team is pretty much blocked in everywhere else. They can't go purple, or I mean, they could if they wanted to invade them, but there's really no point in doing that. They could go toward the green, but they were a part of them, and they kind of fought against each other, so there's really no point in doing that either. So really, the red team is kind of secluded to only going towards Africa, unless, of course, they want to throw hands. Now, I did say something about the purple team in the last episode, and that was that they were going to be moving around the world map, and that is still their plan. However, there's one slight issue. They're stuck. As you can see, the yellow team completely boxes them in, and the red team is to their east, so they can't go east. So what the purple team does instead is that they go across the sea. Now, large-scale sea transportation isn't necessarily in the grasp of civilization just yet. However, they are able to transport people as well as scouts, and they make a landing in Greece and start to explore the peninsula. At this point, they start to colonize it, and they reach up across the coast over here and meet up with the other side of the yellow team, in which case now they have an easier way to get back and forth between the peninsula and well, the other peninsula. And they go ahead and claim more of the Greek area until eventually they stop and decide to fully settle in to the Greek peninsula. Take a shot every time I say peninsula. You're not going to make it through the video. Meanwhile, we have the yellow team doing some expansion. They are moving around and moving around freely. Remember, these are the guys that wanted to go up north to get to the colder areas, and they have pretty much done just that as of now. But they also have interest in taking some of these southern Balkan areas, especially considering that the purple team is moving around down here and taking land that the yellow team could want. At this point, more and more of the Balkans are being discovered, and word gets out that there's a whole ginormous continent up here. Of course, they don't know about the Baltic Sea or anything like that, but they do know that there's a lot of open land right here along this half circle. The Greek team is fully aware of this, and they start to expand as well, now going north of the Caspian and heading into what is modern day Kazakhstan. Eventually, it is figured out that the Caspian Sea is in fact a sea and not an ocean, and with this knowledge, the green team seeks to fully encapsulate the whole sea. Did I use the right word? Encapsulate? Is that a word? Encapsulate. Express the essential features of something. No, I was right. Enclose something in, or as in a capsule. I was right, sort of. Encapsulate, I guess, is an appropriate word to use. So yeah, the Caspian Sea country is now going to be referred to as the Caspian Sea country. And I know some of you guys were suggesting names. You guys were telling me to base it off of some other historical things. I think that might be too much for me because eventually this whole map will be filled. And yeah, so we're just going to stick with certain country, you know, Caspian Sea country, or Southern Arabian country, or red country. At this point, people figure out Cyprus exists, and the red team goes on a long and excruciating journey across northern Africa to figure out what exactly is going on. They eventually see it joint upwards, in which case they now think that, you know, since there's land over here, there's probably land connecting over through here where Italy is. So the red team makes it their interest to follow this sea completely, and this is their official colony. Before, they were just exploring it and, you know, kind of marking it, but now they're officially colonizing it. And the red team gets itself all the way up to Tunisia, in which now they see that they were wrong and there's more ocean up here. And now we have the Age of Exploration kicking off. Now, in real life, the Age of Exploration was when the Americas were colonized, right? In this case, it's now where these earlier civilizations are exploring the world map instead of focusing on themselves. The red team has fully explored all of northern Africa and has found the Atlantic Ocean, in which now they stop and once again go to colonize this land. Although they don't go too far, because this point is very far from this point. And if you know anything about countries that are too big, if you're not stable enough, that tends to not last very long. So they stop and they stabilize themselves. They work on assimilating this, although there's no people there to assimilate. They more so, like, I guess, take firmer control of it. They move military assets over there to ensure that no one, like, you know, pops up like the green team did, who rebelled against the red team. So really what they're trying to do is just ensure their survival even when they're stretching out very far. Now we have the blue team doing something very similar, but going down the other coast of Africa, except now they're not going to go all the way down. They're instead going to focus in on the Ethiopian area and fully shading in this. And once they have fully explored it, they go to colonize it. And this goes well for them for now, as they took over what is Somaliland and also Somalia and parts of Ethiopia. The purple team is now going to continue its expansion, going up north and exploring areas in the Croatian Bosnian area. They then colonize these areas, and soon it is figured out that Italy is a thing that exists. The red team also figures this out with seeing Sicily, and eventually they put two and two together, and the Italian peninsula is now known about. So the red team takes the treacherous journey across the Mediterranean Sea and makes a landing in Sicily and colonizes the entire island, where the purple team does something different. They go over to the boot of Italy and colonize the southern portion, cutting off the red team from any further expansion of the peninsula. The red team isn't too happy about this, but they could honestly, you know, just take Cyprus or Crete. So they let this slide for now. I mean, plus they have a whole continent down here they could go after if they really wanted to. But the issue with that is, you know, the Saharan desert, that's kind of hard to explore. So they just don't. The Caspian Sea country, though, they have no fear of expansion. They're going to keep going, even if it means it destabilizes them. They eventually start to colonize all of what is modern day Iran. And from here, they move across the southern Asian coast. And something that happened a lot in early civilization history was like the breaking apart of and formation of new countries, civilizations. And really, there wasn't many continuous countries that survived very long other than like the exception of like the Romans and the Ottomans. And that's something that I haven't really highlighted well here. Now, I'm not going to be basing any kind of like time off of this series, so there will be like no blank, you know, it's year 100 or year 200 or something like that. That's too much to keep up with. So instead, we'll just probably go by time periods. So like I said, it's the Age of Exploration, but at a much earlier time. And like I said, back then, countries didn't stick around too long. They usually collapsed or formed into something else. And the yellow team is about to figure that out. So rebels in the southern part of the yellow country break away from it and essentially say, hey, we don't like you anymore. They also start to colonize some land when they break away. And the yellow government is seen as weak. Now, remember, these are the guys that wanted to go up north. They're the cold guys. They want it to be cold. They don't want to be warm and sweaty like it is in the Arabian desert. These guys, though, they don't care. They think that the yellow team was too focused on, you know, moving around and getting to where they want to be instead of focusing in on their civilians and, you know, settling down as a country. So the orange part breaks away from it. This is a mixture of a bunch of different states / provinces within the yellow civilization. And as time goes on, more and more start to break away until eventually it's basically the entire western part of the country that is gone. Now, a majority of the yellow team's government is up here in like Crimea and over here near the Sea of Azov. So it's not too crippling, but they are going to try to fight their way out of this. Unfortunately for them, though, it's not going to go well. In fact, there's even more groups breaking away. This time, there's a group down here over where Georgia is that breaks away, and they're in favor of joining up with the red team. In order to avoid any kind of conflict with the red team and to not fight a two-front war, the yellow team grants them their independence, in which case the pink team takes this and runs and joins the red team, so the red team expands without doing anything. And now the yellow team starts to fight its war. This war is pretty brutal. It's the deadliest war of this time so far, and these civilizations have not seen fighting like this ever. The yellow team makes some pretty impressive gains going into what is present-day Romania. However, the orange team tactics are very similar to that of guerrilla warfare fighting. And eventually, exhausted and unequipped yellow team troops started getting pushed back by the orange team. Now, it is theorized that the orange team might be being supplied by one of these other countries. Who is actually doing it won't say, but the fighting definitely goes back and forth for a bit. You know, the orange team makes some pretty impressive gains, and then the yellow team does, until eventually there's a stalemate, and from there they agree to peace. In the peace deal, the orange team is released. Simple as that. And now we have yet another civilization on the map. Now with their newfound independence, the orange team doesn't take any time to, you know, satisfy the civilians. The whole point of the orange team was to satisfy these civilians and to not take such an expansive policy. As we know, like I said, they do this, but as we know with governments in real life, they don't always keep their word, and the orange team is right back to doing what the yellow team was doing, which is rapid expansion. They now reach over toward the purple team and connect up with them and share a border, but they don't go too far as to not fully lose the trust of their civilians. As you saw, the purple team took that land, and now they will be going up north and taking even more. They also expand their bases on the Italian peninsula and start to explore even further north until they meet the Alpine mountains, in which case they are stopped. They don't have the capabilities to, I mean, a small group could probably do it, but they themselves don't have the capabilities to pass up on the Alpine mountains. So instead they just kind of go around them, and humanity is at this point blocked from going any further into Europe. Elsewhere, we have the green team continue to explore down into India. They now go down the southern coast and figure out that India is also kind of a well, I don't know if it's a peninsula. Yeah, it is a peninsula. They also figure out that a portion of Sri Lanka exists. And at this point, humans have found themselves in various corners of the world. Well, their world. The red team sends an expedition that goes pretty much on par with the Nile River. They find a whole bunch of sand and a whole bunch of nothing, but they do expand their colonial claims deeper into Africa. At this point, the red team is obviously very large. Now, if a civilization like this was this big back then, it probably wouldn't survive for too long. But due to the aristocracy that rules it, they are very people friendly, and you know, they also want to expand like any other country does. But they also keep in mind their civilians. So kind of like with the yellow and orange team, what happened there, the red team is what the yellow team should have been. Also, let me know in the comments, which civilization is your favorite? I want to know. Me personally, the red team, because it's red and because it was the first civilization. Yeah, let me know what you like in the comments. I can see the purple team probably being a dark horse contender among the favorites. It's probably my second favorite, and it's not because purple is one of my favorite colors either. JK, it's definitely because of that. Anyway, yellow team, they learned their lesson, but they're not going to learn their lesson for long. They're going to continue to go north and try to get even colder. These guys have a fetish with coldness. An exploration group eventually makes its way up, and they find themselves in the Baltic area and along the Baltic Sea. Hey everyone else, we found water. Although it's not a lot of it because it looks like it's a gulf. The Gulf of Finland. There's also this really big lake. All right, the yellow team has found its coldness. In fact, it's maybe a little too cold. And all in all, they do an amazing job in exploring Northern Europe, discovering almost all of the Baltics and southern Finland. And now they take their leave and go as they start to expand even further north. The yellow team also has a pretty good monopoly on lumber. Now, of course, the orange and purple team do as well, but they're going really good with that. You know, they have all of Ukraine. I mean, the green team eventually will have a good monopoly on uranium. Too bad that won't be discovered until, you know, thousands of years later. All right, something's going on with the blue team. Let's check that out. All right, that's not too good. We have another area breaking away. This time, though, the blue team doesn't really feel like fighting it, and the blue team eventually takes over the other blue team, and we have our sole first African civilization popping up. And the blue team is kind of like depressed. I don't think they're too happy, you know, not happy. The king probably isn't too happy either. You know, he's got his crown and, you know, king stuff going on, but he's probably not too happy. Not happy at all. So anyway, new country, yay. The red team doesn't really interact with them, but you know what they do is that they expand further into Africa to kind of block them off from taking any land from them. And the teal team doesn't give a crap because they weren't even looking to do that. They're more set on establishing themselves. Meanwhile, back up north, the yellow team does a little bit more. They take a little bit more land, and then they stop before the orange team has part two. And the green team is continuing to expand southward, except they're starting to fight themselves. And what I mean by that is that, well, as you can see, green team is very elongated. And the green team is interesting because it's not like the other countries, which are mostly all aristocracies. You know, at first we had our dictatorship ruling. We had our, then we had our aristocracies. You know, at first we had our dictatorships. And now we have our aristocracies. And if you know anything about ancient history, then you know the next part is monarchy. And then after monarchy, you have democracy. And after democracy, you have whatever comes next. Probably republicanism, I guess. But these guys, they never got the aristocracy memo. They have a rule by dictator, and that's because the guy that broke away, who was in this province, just wanted power, and he got it. He got a lot of land. But the military isn't too happy about that, and the military is the one that's doing the expanding for them. So the military says straight up, screw you, and they just kind of overthrow the whole southern area of the country. And that's not good for the green team for many reasons. One, they're now disconnected from this area over here. I mean, they can go up and around, but that's boring. And two, this is a lot, and it's their entire military. So the green team is going to immediately surrender over to the lime team. This is a military revolution, and unless they start conscripting their own citizens, which are they're probably not going to listen to the dictator because he's a dictator, then they won't be able to fight at all. So they agreed to peace with the green team under the condition that they get the full access to the Caspian Sea, in which the lime team will grant that. However, they have to agree to a border rework. In other words, I don't like how this looks, so we're going to change it. All right, that's slightly less hideous. And the reason for this major city right here, well, not major city, because there are no major cities, but this is like a big population center, and the green team wanted to make sure that they had that, so that was part of their condition. Other than that, the lime team is free. And what do you know? They go right back to doing what they were forced to do by the dictator. They expand their country a little bit further until eventually they stop colonizing and instead send out exploration teams who are going to focus in on the Indian subcontinent area / India. And at this point, pretty much all of India is known about. Back over in Europe, we have the purple team completing their conquest of the Italian peninsula and completely colonizing the entire thing. They now meet up with the Alpine Mountains and are essentially blocked from going anywhere else because the orange team just took the remaining area that meets up with the Alpine area. Anyway, the purple country is going to be our first subject here. Now remember, when they were first created, they were created to be nomadic. They were not going to stay in the same place. However, for the entirety of their existence, they have stayed in the same place and they have expanded. However, to the point where, you know, it's just like they're still where they started. So are they really nomadic? Well, my answer to that question is yes. After a long time, they finally move out of the Turkish peninsula and into mainland Europe, leaving this land pretty much barren. So at this point, we have different regional governments rising up and taking control of the different areas. And I want to be trying to do a new thing here where we keep the colors similar. So like these countries came from the main purple one, which means that they are going to be of that purple-ish color. Now, of course, this could get a little out of hand with how many different countries are going to be. So we'll try to keep it simple for now. However, this is what we have happening, and the rest is taken over by the red team. So yeah, the purple team officially moves out of the Turkish peninsula, and I'm actually just gonna go ahead and clean up some of these borders because they don't look very good. All right, that's acceptable, maybe. Anyway, like I said at the beginning, some of these countries are a little too big, and unfortunately, the red team is one of them. Now, if you remember from the last episode, they did expand greatly. They went all the way into Africa and established new lands over here, and even established lands over here in Sicily. Now, like I said, I keep repeating myself in this series, so I need to stop doing that, but these countries, they can't get too big, otherwise they're going to collapse. And that's something that was common in the time frame. Now, I'm not sure what the exact time period is at this point in regards to our actual human history. So, you know, this is an alternate timeline, so it's not like it's actually going to align with ours. So I'm not really entirely sure how advanced these civilizations are just yet. I know they're not advanced enough to cross the ocean or, you know, go to Australia or even to like probably make that voyage. They can move around the Mediterranean Sea just fine, but that's because the waters here are slightly less rough than actual ocean waters. I'm not sure exactly like what age they're in, like are they in the Bronze Age or I don't know. That's where you guys are gonna have a little bit of creativity. You can kind of make this up for yourselves and see how you want it to be. Anyway, I'll stop yapping. We have a large portion of the red team breaking away from the red team, and those colors are a little too similar. All right, they're going to be like a really dark blue color. There we go. But yeah, these guys break away from the red team, and the red team doesn't really have the capabilities to really reinstate all this land for themselves. So what happens to them is they're basically kicked back to what would be the Suez Canal. And now we have a new ginormous country being formed over here in Northern Africa. However, the stability of this country is not very good, and it soon finds itself in internal conflict. Anyways, back up in Northern Europe where everything is nice and happy, we have more and more of Europe being discovered, now going into Poland and even into Germany. The Alps are still a kind of tricky situation, so they mostly avoid that region, but more and more of the world is being discovered, and eventually these countries start to expand as well. The Orange Team, which is, you know, very anti-expansionist, does do a little bit of expanding, but they also want to make sure that the people within are happy, so they don't do too much and focus on some more social issues. The Yellow Team, not learning their lesson, is going to expand north. And remember, these are like the weird cold people that want to be cold, so they keep going up. At this point though, there is internal conflict in the Yellow Team once again, and well, they're finally maybe going to learn their lesson because an uprising occurs in the main areas of the Yellow Country. Now remember, they started out from, you know, going up this coast over here and up to here. Eventually they lost the Orange Team, which used to be a part of their country, but now we're seeing areas of what is the more populated areas of the Yellow Country rise up against it, and eventually their government is overthrown and a new one is established. However, the ideals of the expansionists, which are currently up north, remain, and this really isn't simply just a new government taking over, this is a whole new country taking over. It established itself pretty nicely down here in the southern part of what would be Ukraine and Russia, and it leaves the expansionist Yellow Country up to the north. Having just lost half of their territory and all of their population, the Yellow Team will now go even more north and eventually meet up with what is the Baltic Sea. And this is pretty huge because another water source has been found. Fishing at this point isn't as big as it used to be for like down here in Mesopotamia, but it is still like a fairly good source of food. So having access to the Baltic Sea is pretty huge if it isn't frozen. Anyway, Sicily just broke away and became its own thing. That blends in very nicely with the background. And remember how I said these guys were unstable earlier? Well, they are. And it turns out that Sicily thing wasn't just Sicily. It actually turns out to be half of this country. So yeah, that happens. And it splits pretty much right in half. So yeah, there's a lot of new countries that have appeared at this point, and it's not stopping anytime soon. Now, back to some more lore. The Orange Country has some lore that it needs to uncover. A group of explorationists who, you know, have discovered Germany at this point continue going over this way until eventually they get lost. I'm not sure exactly how they get lost, but they managed to get lost. And it's a pretty large group of people. It's like around 100 people who are on this voyage to discover more of Europe. So what they do instead of trying to get back is that they establish a new country, like any other sane person would have done. And they establish themselves in what is the current day Netherlands, as well as Belgium. Eventually they do go on more voyages, exploring more and more of the coast of Europe and France. And the orange team does eventually get curious as to what happened to their exploration group. So of course they send people out, and eventually they find the new country, which has been flourishing for a couple of years now. And well, I mean, they're not going to do anything about it because it's been a few years. And yeah, that's another thing that I need to mention. Perspective on time. You have to make it up for yourself. If you think this all happens within a couple of months of each other, then go ahead. If you think it happens within a couple of years with each other, then you're on the same kind of train as I am. Now, I'm not sure how rapid this expansion would be from Mesopotamia, but at this point, it's been a few decades. Yeah, so you can kind of have your own perspective on time at this point. But yeah, civilization is greatly starting to expand outward, starting from, well, actually, it was down in here, and essentially just exploding out, mostly going north towards the colder areas. But yeah, at this point, there's going to be even more expansion, but this time going east. The Lime team, which was fairly newly formed, will now go down into what is currently India, and they will establish themselves pretty nicely along this coastline. At this point, the green team is also looking to expand. They simply just head north and go along the border of what is now the gold team. They also start to do some exploration of their own, going straight up north, but eventually it gets kind of too cold because, you know, Russia, and they are forced to stop. They then decide to go east, but this is pretty boring, so they stop because it's just a bunch of plains, and yeah, they just focus on colonizing this for now. Let's talk about the red team. The red team has lost a lot of its land recently, and in the past couple of years, the people of the red team have become very kind of anxious that they might be out of touch with what's going on in the rest of the world. You know, at this point, there's a ton of civilizations. At the first, it was just the red team, and then the blue team broke away, and then you had things like the green team forming from a part of the red team, and then you had the yellow team, and then the purple team, and from there, it just, you know, exploded, quite literally. But the people are getting kind of anxious that the red team might be on the decline and that their once powerful country isn't as powerful anymore. So with popular support by the people, the red team will gear up and go to war. And war is not something that's very common at this point in civilization because, you know, there's really no need for it. Civilizations on their own aren't very like strong to like stick together due to either food shortages or like plague or disease or stuff like that. So war is not something that's very plausible. However, when it pleases the majority of people, I'm sure they'd be able to raise an army to do this. They start invading and attacking into what is the green territory, and the green team, who is completely taken by this, is completely unprepared, and the red team has a lot of success in taking over their land. Eventually, though, the green team does come to a compromise with the red team, dealing with peace, in which, you know, the green team just accepts its fate and the red team is allowed to take the land that they took. The Lime team, now fearing for its life, will go ahead and put a bunch of troops on their border. And this is going to be pretty expensive for the Lime team because they're not a very strong country. They just formed in the last episode, and, you know, the people here aren't too fond of the idea of war. And putting troops on the border of another country usually doesn't really go well with the populace anyway, unless they're like warmongers. So yeah, it gets a little rebellious within the Lime team, but they're able to control it for now. Anyway, back over here with our newest country, I think, maybe? No. Second newest country. They're going to continue the will of the red team and go west. They eventually meet up with what is current day Morocco and keep slithering down the coast of Western Africa until eventually they get a little too long and can't go anymore. At this point, expeditions into the Sahara are tried, but they usually don't end too well, so nothing much comes from it. However, some very brave individuals manage to get up into what is Iberia, and Southern Europe is pretty much discovered at this point. Now, of course, you know, I think in real life, on like a very clear day in southern Spain, you can see across this channel. That's what my Spanish teacher said, at least. So they probably knew that it was there, but they just never discovered it or explored it. But yeah, at this point, Europe is pretty close to being fully discovered. Speaking of the Dutch, they're going to go ahead and discover and explore all of the Danish peninsula and the surrounding islands, and even into parts of Sweden. Now at this point, once again, this is a fairly new country, but they are very expansionist, because remember, they were previously a discovery group for the Orange Country. So yeah, of course they'd be fully set on expanding. They go up into what is the Danish peninsula, but they don't really dare to touch these islands because, you know, it might be a little bit too much for the new country, but they do take over the northern areas of Germany and the Netherlands. The purple team just discovered Sardinia. The purple team just discovered Corsica, and hence Sardinia. And eventually they do manage to colonize these islands. This weird pink purple thing discovers Crete, and colonizes it. And the red team finally figured out what that big island was. It was Cyprus. So at this point, a majority of Mediterranean islands have been discovered and colonized, and a lot of Europe is starting to come together. Over here in where the Lime team is, they're going to continue to go down into India, but remember what I said earlier, they were feeling a little bit rebellious on the inside, and the people of this country are not going to be too keen of this expanding when, there's a giant threat on the border. First you take our taxpayer money and you put troops on the border, now you're using that to go even more east? Really? Sounds like the Lime team government doesn't really know what it's doing. And what's the solution to that? Well, overthrowing the government, of course. A large movement takes place across all of the mainland Lime territory. This is like their base territory. And eventually a new government rises up and replaces the old one. But like what we've seen before in this series, the old one manages to either escape or, sends a convoy out and goes over to its new expansion territory and lives on. So that government gets kicked out of what is Iran and moves over to what is now like Pakistan and India. There are a few skirmishes on the way out though. The Lime team isn't let go too easily, but eventually they do stop, and the Lime team is living on over here in the Indian subcontinent. England was just discovered by the Dutch. That's going to lead to a series of world events which are very regrettable, isn't it? The purple team managed to get across those mountains now, and they now are going into southern France. They still aren't able to fully conquer the Alp Mountains, but they break through over here, so that's cool. And what this leads to is a rapid discovery of southern Europe. And eventually the purple, the brown, and this color of blue countries all come together and essentially agree on to explore the rest of Europe, or what they're able to. Now this is the first time that we've seen any kind of major collaboration between countries, and slowly but surely over the next couple of years, the purple and the blue and the brown teams are able to fully discover the rest of southern Europe, as well as these islands. And really all that remains in the mainland continent that they haven't discovered is the Alp Mountains, but the purple team is quickly working on that. And of course, over those few years, they went ahead and colonized some of this land for themselves. So the brown team gets a little bit, the purple team got a little bit, and of course, the blue team got a little bit. At this point, the expansion into Europe is becoming very popular, and a lot of these old countries are feeling kind of left out. So what are they going to do? Well, start a war, of course. This new country here gets immediately opped on by the red team for literally no reason. And it scares this country so bad that they decide to change their color. So yeah, the red civilization is quickly becoming a world bully, and a lot of the countries around it really don't like it. The blue team, of course, doesn't like it. The green team doesn't like it. They just got invaded. The lime, or I guess this new country, is scared of it. I mean, this used to be a part of it, but it broke away, so of course they don't like it. These guys are scared. Well, the orange team doesn't even fear God, so yeah, the orange team built different. The gold team, well, they barely even border them, so they don't care. Hey, guess what time it is? It's time for our annual yellow team breakaway. That's right, the yellow team really can't get it together, and they have yet another breakaway in what is now the current Russian Federation. A new country just dropped, and yeah, they do a little bit of their own colonizing because I don't like how they looked on the map. Still really don't. You know what? Good enough. All right, the yellow team at this point is being very careful now. Of course, they want to keep expanding because they have an addiction, so they do go up into the Baltic areas. But after going into a little bit of Poland and Kaliningrad, they eventually make a vow saying, hey, we're done. We won't do this anymore. And the yellow team is finally at peace with them cold selves. So yeah, yellow team. You only lost, 2/3 of your country. Well, actually 3/4. It's kind of crazy to think that this entire grouping right here, which, I try to keep the colors very similar, they all came from the same thing, which was this, deadbeat dad kind of thing. Now, shame on the yellow country. Can we get some yellow country hate in the comments? And the purple team is a sort of nomadic kind of country. Now, they are a very large country at this point, so the whole nomadic thing is probably changing from, moving around a lot to maybe just staying in one place, and they have found themselves on the Italian peninsula. But they will do one last thing before they go fully, I guess, stationary, and that is them releasing another country in southern Greece. Now, this country was kind of pushing for its independence and, the whole nomadic thing, so the purple team is okay with releasing them. However, they do make a new statement saying that they will be no longer spreading around, and they will now be going stationary instead of nomadic. So now the purple team, losing some, maybe eventually some valuable land, they are going to be hungry for more expansion, except they won't be colonizing. They will be going to war. They're going to be going to war with the country that holds on to Sicily, and they will successfully take that country over. And now we have ourselves, well, Rome versus Carthage in another timeline. The blue team isn't too happy about this. However, they won't be able to retaliate because they don't have the technology to do so. The purple team is probably more of one of the most technological advanced countries in the world at this point. Obviously, the red team is number one. Purple's probably number two. you know, 3, probably the blue team down here, and then the green team up here. So really, with this series, it's a lot of, you know, making your own assumptions. Like, the most powerful country on this map is the red team, obviously, but number 2 is pretty much up to you. I would argue that it's probably the purple team, the green team, or the orange team, but you might think differently. And that's totally fine, because this is your guys' scenarios. I do look at the comments a lot in these videos, and I end up doing a lot of your suggestions for the series. Like the whole Rome versus Carthage reincarnation, that is something that I saw in the comments, and that's something that I did. So if you guys want to see something happen on this map, then, you know, put it in the comments, and it might actually happen in the video. Anyway, with the recent loss of Sicily over here to the purple team, the new blue team will go ahead and get some more land in the Iberian Peninsula. The purple team sees this, and they don't like this, so they move to cut off the blue team from taking any more of the land north of Iberia, should they want to, and they meet up with the Bay of Biscay. Is that what? I forgot what it's called. But they meet up with the water over here in France, and this cuts off the blue team from going north into France, and this makes the blue team even more angry. So the purple team and the blue team have some serious beef. Meanwhile, the blue team, they haven't been touched in a long while, and that's because they can't expand anywhere. So with that, you know, they're kind of domesticated, and they can just focus on themselves internally, and that's part of the reason they've been around for so long. So I thought I would just address that, because they haven't moved in a while. I mean, they did try to colonize Africa, but that didn't work, obviously. And, you know, actually, speaking of this colony, it essentially just collapses, and that leads to the darker blue team coming in and taking land, as well as, believe it or not, the red team, who takes a good chunk of them over where Djibouti would be nowadays, or I guess actually Eritrea. The blue team will make no attempt to take land here. They've gone pacifist. And a new country forms in the ashes of the old teal team, except it's kind of really divided, so it doesn't go exactly like that. It goes more of like this. And the teal team is left to southern Africa. So they are the southernmost country in the world, whereas we have the yellow team at the northernmost. You guys also cooked up some pretty good lore for the yellow team. I was reading through it. It was kind of good. I didn't read through all of it though, because there were a lot of comments on it, but the top one I saw was pretty good. Anyway, now to the yellow team. Speaking of, these guys have had some, they're probably like the most interesting country so far because of just how much they've changed. You know, they started down here in Crimea, and now they made their way up to Northern Europe in the Baltics. And honestly, let's go ahead and screw them over some more. So within this country, you know, the people, the civilians of the country, they do not want to expand anymore. However, the government wants to expand, or it wanted to. Now it has taken a more of a relaxed approach since they keep breaking apart, as you can see here. All 3 of these countries used to be part of the yellow team, by the way, if you're new to the series. If you're new to the series, why are you watching episode 4? You'll watch episode 1 and then come back. But yeah, there's still members of this government who want to do the expansion thing, and what they do is they basically say, we quit. Any civilians within any of these 4 countries who want to go back to the old ways of the yellow country and want to rapidly expand across open land, come join us. We're starting a new country. And where do they start this new country at? They're going to start it over here in northwestern Poland, or where it would be. And well, they do exactly what they want to do. They expand rapidly. Now, the population of this thing is not much, so it's pretty impressive that they're able to do this. But they eventually have to stop because they just don't have enough people to expand anymore. This country does get a lot of immigration. It gets a lot of people from the brown team going over, a lot of people from the orange team, the yellow team, and all of these other previous yellow team countries. Everyone else is pretty blocked off from joining for obvious reasons. You know, the purple team would have to go around the Alps, which that's a lot to do. So they don't do that. Also, I think it's important to note that I don't think countries like go back and forth between each other at this point. I mean, you probably can do it, but like, it's not like you don't want to do it. I'm sure most of these countries are pretty racist. Well, yeah, they definitely are. Anyway, the brown team will do a little bit more expansion. They're going to go for a few of these Copenhagen Islands, and they'll even go into Sweden. But at this point, it's time for some more exploration. We have to catch up on that. Now, when I do these short little exploration breaks, it doesn't mean that this is all like, you know, the world stops expanding, explores, and then goes back to expanding. That's not the case. This is pretty much happening at the same time that all of the expanding is happening. It's just too much to jump back and forth at the same time. So yeah, this might have already happened, but the brown team does explore more north into Sweden until they have a lot of the southern part of Sweden explored. They also send another exploration team onto Britain, and they go a little bit north until they get near Wales. The lime team puts on a bunch of cold gear, goes into Russia, exploring the Moscow area. And most importantly, the lime team over here will go ahead and explore the rest of continental India. So that is now all discovered. They know what's happening here, and they start to move more into this area. People hear about the vast open land over in India and they are immediately interested, especially people from these older countries over here. So like we saw with the formation of this what team is this? Beige team. A lot of people are going to immigrate over to this new open land over here. So people from the green team, people from this color green team, people from the lime team, people from the blue team making the voyage, and even people from the red team making the voyage. And at this point, I'm running out of colors to use. So we're going to be using this new color. It's like an orange, brown, red thing. This new country forms, and it's a country of immigrants, like the United States was when it was formed. Nobody, I mean, of course, there's no humans here, so obviously nobody from India is here. But they quickly become a very large country, and that's because of the mass amount of immigration from other countries. And at this point, I do think it's fair for me to say that naval travel is getting a lot better. Of course, you're not going to be able to go around the world. However, you are able to make distances like from Arabia over to India, from, you know, this part of, well, I don't know why you would do this, but this part of Iberia over to Sicily, you know, from northern Libya up to Greece and Albania. I would say even Norway to the Denmark area down here. In fact, let me just draw a line. That's how far they can go at this point. And with there being more and more people being born, because, you know, it's been a while since the Red Country was formed, technology is advancing pretty rapidly until we eventually enter a new age, which I'm going to be calling the age of rapid technology expansion. So the world is becoming more and more advanced. And at this point, I don't know what year they're in. You guys can make up your own years, and you know, they're like in a Bronze Age or an Iron Age. That's all up to you. You guys decide how things are happening. Eventually, as the series goes on, you know, eventually, you know, guns will be added, but that's many episodes down the line. We're also going to be having things like, you know, bows and arrows. I'm pretty sure we're probably at that point or past it. You know, maybe we're like in a medieval kind of time. So really, this world is very advanced for how like confined it is. But who knows, maybe soon that we'll see a rapid expansion into Asia. Definitely not hinting at the next episode or anything. Anyway, back over to the European team over here with the Dutch. They are going to go ahead and colonize, or start to colonize, England. This is a pretty smart move by them because they now control the English Channel, and you know, it's not like there's like active trade going through here, but it is nice just to, you know, own a body of water. This will be useful later if they survive. And I'm actually kind of starting to see a parallel, you know, the Saxons coming over to England, or the Anglo-Saxons. Yeah, this is interesting. This new country has gotten itself some more people in it now, so they're going to expand a little bit more. Not much, but they will make themselves look presentable when you zoom out, sort of. The yellow team will go ahead and jump across the Gulf of Finland and take this land. People start to freak out a little bit, but the government is quick to calm them down, saying, just calm down. But at the same time, they go behind their back and take over the rest of the surrounding area, but no one really notices too much. Ignore the tax raise, right? Anyway, the yellow team is now looking pretty good, actually. They have a lot of this Baltic coastal areas, and I know this area up here is probably frozen as hell. Like, they're not getting any boats out of there. But, you know, you have down here in Kaliningrad where you can, you know, ship stuff off if you want to go explore over here. Speaking of exploring, this island is discovered, as well as this island over here, which is owned by Yemen. And honestly, sticking over to this area, we see that travel is becoming more and more prevalent by sea. We see that this new country formed over here in India is now going right across over to this other country over here in Africa, and hence this coastal area is further explored, and you can kind of start to see travel routes develop. You know, of course, going with the curvature of the Earth, so of course it's not going to be like a straight line. Oh, I'm just remembering something from AP World. So monsoon winds, those are important because they go like this, and then I actually kind of forgot how they work. I know it's like one big circular thing though, right? Something like that. Yeah. More area around India is discovered, and Asia is becoming a hotspot for new explorers, and a lot of people are starting to immigrate over here, knowing that there is still a vast amount of land to be discovered. Christopher Columbus, just kidding, we're not at that point yet. But we are at the point where the Alpine Mountains are now fully explored, and the purple team, having just explored them, will go ahead and colonize the area. Now, when I say colonize, I don't mean like they, you know, start building cities in the Alps. No, they just lay claim to that area. I doubt there's anyone living there except for like lumberjacks. But they do lay claim to the area and expand themselves pretty nicely. And the purple team at this point is now ranked number 2 in the world of power. Now I know I said I'm going to leave that to you guys, but that is an official statement by me to you, letting you know that, hey, you know, you can make up everything else, but red is number 1 and purple is number 2. The rest is up to you. That all kind of worked out in a weird rhyme thing. With the mainland area of Europe starting to close in, more of these countries are going to be looking to expand in order to get as big as possible before they are cut off from expanding anymore. The orange team makes itself one final land grab. The new beige kind of team thing does their thing. and the yellow team will somehow justify taking the remainder of this land. The brown team moves quickly to take over any land that the cream team could take. However, they don't go too far, as they don't really want to border anyone else. They don't want that beef, they just want to work on themselves, which honestly respectable. But they do start to take more and more land until eventually they just stop. Good for them, having self-control. The purple team will take a little bit more land until eventually they opt out of this whole expansion thing. And the rest will go over to the cream country. I gotta think of a different name. So now, Eastern Europe is filled up and looking something like this. Not a lot of countries here because they're so freaking huge. But we do see a few more countries pop up. You guys can make up your own scenario for these countries popping up. However, they will be popping up. One over here in Western France. The purple team is quick to cut them off from any further expansion because they were like that. And guess what? Another new country. This time where Switzerland is. Well, north of there, but they're like German, French, weird hybrid thing. They're here now. And now Central Europe is completely full, and we're pretty much at the point where Western Europe is about to be full as well. So the purple team, being the land gobblers that they are going to take more land. They're going to also snatch these islands right here and take a little bit of land over here from northern Spain until eventually they reach their limit of land expansion because they are getting freaking huge. And now for our final formation, we have this weird dark blue black hybrid country thing. I'm really struggling to find colors, or we'll do that looks better. These guys are their own thing, but also partly part of the blue country over here. And still being the softies that they are unable to do anything about this formation. And honestly, it's kind of surprising that they have this land in Spain. Wouldn't be surprised if they lost that in the next video. But yeah, modern day Portugal has been formed. Okay, well, I couldn't just leave this white space here for the thumbnail, so I had to color it in. We have this dark purple country forming. Make it up for your guys' selves. Honestly, I was thinking that, you know, maybe people from the purple country who wanted to keep expanding despite the massive land amount that they have already. The government said no, so they did it anyway. That's my lore for it. You guys can make up your own lore for it. Once again, thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.
And of course, thank you to all the superfans. This includes Terminator, Xalens, Georgie Badev, Deathlord 182, ABXI, Pablo Sigma Cat, Death Strider X, Hammertoad 45, CTG on YT, Poland Country Ball, Nevada Garbage Trucks, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.